Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. We're talking about land dispossession that's been affecting various communities. Before the break, we had Ighsaan Higgins in studio, and I've asked him to remain behind as we've invited another guest into studio. Ighsaan?
Yeah, and shukran for that introduction. And yes, we do have another guest in studio, and that is none other than Mr. Cassiem Khan of the PAC, the Pan-Africanist Congress. Now, for me, it's like, when I was a youngster, when we were like 14, 15, 16 years old, and we were, let's say in Afrikaans, the klipgooiers, the people that were throwing rocks at the Caspers and, fighting the security police in the streets. There was only two parties that was on our minds at the time, and that was the PAC and the ANC. And yet, the PAC was nowhere to be seen in the last 30 years.
Right.
So when I'm very inspired to see somebody like Mr. Cassiem Khan, he's now obviously contesting the election on behalf of the PAC, and I mean, he can tell us a little bit more about it. But the PAC has always been very, very strong on the land issue.
Right.
And I would like to hear a little bit more from Mr. Cassiem Khan in terms of what their strategy is to implement the rollout of land in South Africa in accordance with the Constitution, with
Absolutely.
constitutional principles.
Brother Cassiem, I know it's a busy time. Thanks for affording us your time, coming into studio. Among so many issues, land is very key. And, it's affected so many, it's divided so many of our communities in some regard as well. Where does the PAC stand on that?
Well, thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome.
By way of introduction, I am also of that klipgooier generation.
Right.
I had the advantage of not just being a klipgooier, but joining the Azanian People's Liberation Army at that age already. And so I would say for us, it's not just a key issue. For us, it is absolutely the central issue.
Right.
And I think one of the reasons why it is the central issue for us is because this was the first crime that was committed in South Africa. Every time we talk about what's the problem, what happened, why are we not getting things right? And unless we go to the cause of our oppression, the cause of our suffering was that the land as our source of life, of sustenance, of dignity, we were robbed of that from the first time the colonialists came, and the continuation through after the Dutch, the British, and then of course any other multinational company that came and further robbed us of our land. And so this is for us the key issue. The second issue that I want us to keep in mind related to this is we did not just have Van Riebeeck with his 3 drunken ships who came and then decided to take something, and then we jumped to 1913. What we had was successive genocides that had taken place. Now, we had our sister earlier from the Ighsaan communities. Now, for people living in the Western Cape, or even coming to the Cape, they drive through a place called the Toit Skloof Pass. If you ask yourself, who is the Toit and who did he murder? Today, every person in the world is grappling with that moral divide, as Dr. Mundir Isaac put it, between where we stand on the issue of Gaza. And what we seem to miss is the fact that genocides had occurred in this country for close on to 300 years, maybe less than that. But different types of genocides had taken place against different peoples. Right. So the genocides in the 8 wars of dispossession that took place, in which people like a guy called Lord Graham of the now defunct Grahamstown claimed that he will not tolerate, and then mention the K tribe in His Majesty's land. Then we have Harry Smith, who believed in a bloodlust. And today we honor Harry Smith, and we give name a town after him. And we continue to have a place called Du Toit. And so Du Toit, Harry Smith, Graham, and whoever is of the ilk, they look at us and they say, we have destroyed you. We have robbed you of your dignity. So we can do with you as you please. You can put up governments all you like, but we have taken from you. Now let me just confirm that by what is our current status in this country. 77% of the land continue to remain in the hands of the people who are the inheritors of Graham and Harry Smith and Du Toit and so forth. Now, let us not be too emotional about these things and say, let's put it down to numbers.
Right.
The 2017 land audit that was done, and I'm sure it is reviewed after that, has proven this point of the 77% of the land that was taken. Now let's look at the 23% that is left. The 23% of it that is left is land that belongs to government, that belongs to some traditional communities have access to land, but there's also vacant land. There is land that is in the hands of, that has been given back, interestingly, given to the government to distribute, and they have been sitting on the land. So that's one way of looking at the land. But if we look at the land just as geography, and we are not looking at the land in terms of the indignity that is suffered, because the Constitution in its opening words says, we remember the past, we want to restore the dignity. Now, if we are not addressing those things through the way in which government expenditure is restoring dignity. Right? Now, if 30 years after this new government, we are still talking about shouldn't we keep Section 25 C of the Constitution, which talks about expropriation. Now, there's a nice little line that goes there with it and says, in the interest of the public. So the government can take the land in the interest of the public. I'm asking, who's the public? Whose interests are we talking about? Okay, and so when we talk about issues such as restitution, and I like to rather use the word restoration. Like when we restore, we first honor the fact that a crime had been committed, that something went wrong. And
we
so
acknowledge.
We have to acknowledge and try and atone for it. Now, how is the Deutsch and whatever trying to atone for it? They don't care.
So thank you so much for that, painting that history as well, because it gives us a clearer perspective on where we are today as well. But in terms of the PAC, what is your recommendation going forward, maybe presently, and maybe a couple of projects that you've put in place on how to assist?
Yeah, so firstly, we want an end to this Section 25.
Okay.
Because Section 25 is just confusing everybody. Because it says, as the opening lines also of the Constitution says, the land belongs to all who live in it.
Right.
Now, if you are saying somebody came into my house, stole from me, and now is an equal partner in it, we need a reset of how we're looking at things going forward. So one of the things we make of our Constitution is such a sacred document. It is even holier than our religious documents. We say we are so proud of it. But the first thing that we are missing is the fact that we are welcoming the perpetrator to the land. Okay, so first things that we want to address before we look at projects and different modalities of how we're going to take the land back, and there are many of that. Okay, but one of the things we need to first do is to be able to say, this Constitution needs to have those words redrafted, to re-look at those things. Now, many people find this very problematic, that how dare we say this? And we are asking, is that if we do not acknowledge that that crime had been committed, then what does it make of our going to the ICJ and say, oh, you committed a genocide there, Israel. You people are taking the land. You are killing these people, whatever. So it's okay if it's somewhere else. But is what has happened in this country, was it not a genocide? Understand? And so these are the questions we must grapple with.
Okay. So I think, of course, we need to look at the Constitution. And the big difficulty, of course, is if you want to do a constitutional amendment, you need a certain percentage of people that will all agree with you. And I'm not sure if South Africa has the patience for all that legal shenanigans. So I would have said that if the Constitution is there, work with it, extract from Section 25 what you can. All you need is political will. And you need the proper budgets. I mean, the wording in the Constitution can be utilized. It speaks about infrastructural projects. It speaks about reasons why you can expropriate for just compensation. I mean, within the confines of that, you can have a use it or lose it concept, where people are, if you're not using your land, the government can say to listen, you either start utilizing this land productively, or you're going to lose it after a certain period. Let that person then take the matter to court. And then after the expropriation.
I hear you, and I think that those things are things that will take place in any event. I think that the point at which we are in our history around Section 25 is that even the ruling party currently is cornered on that place, because even they are now reneging on whether they should say expropriation without compensation, because this is something that they held back on. What we need to do is to be able to address that point at that particular level, largely because otherwise our projects are going to be piecemeal. It is going to be able to say, well, you know what, let's see what this small community is saying here, and then we'll get around to the others and to the others later on. Whereas if we go in by the front door and say, okay, now we've done the land audit, okay, and now let's see what the picture is really, because the land audit was a major document that gives us an idea who owns the land, and we can then work against that, update it, improve it, and then be able to say, from your suggestions, this is the land that's immediately available. This is the land that must be immediately restored. Okay, immediately. That's the key point. And it's not about faffing around with it. But again, as you say, the political will needs to be there. And I think the mass of members in Parliament is growing. What we are having, of course, it's very significant that those very parties that voted that we should not have further, that voted against closing, for example, the embassy of South Africa in occupied Palestine. These are the same people who are also saying, no expropriation.
Okay.
Of course. Unfortunately, gentlemen, we have run out of time. Something that we can definitely continue as a conversation. Attorney at Law Ighsaan Higgins, unfortunately, we have to round up. Brother Cassiem, we'd like to maybe continue this at a later time, and maybe next week, inshallah. Have a great evening. Thank you so much for coming into studio. Appreciate it. And that's how we end Hilaal Live. We're back tomorrow. Do join us between 5 and 7 from the Cape Town team, Sohail Barnes and myself, Luqman Shadrack. Have a great evening. Assalamu alaikum.